Ethan Parker stood in his small Seattle apartment, pacing fast as rain hammered the windows, each drop sounding like the clock, counting down to a moment he wasn't sure he could face. He had always been cautious with people, careful with emotions, careful with anything that asked him to be vulnerable. But tonight felt different because he had been the one to send the message that started all this. It was supposed to be simple, harmless, nothing dramatic, just a "can we talk?" sent to Lucas Hayes after a week of silence that felt longer than it should have. Ethan regretted it the second he hit send, but Lucas replied almost immediately. And now, with Lucas only a few feet away on the other side of the door, Ethan felt unprepared in a way he couldn't explain. His heart pounded from nerves, not danger. Because there was nothing dangerous about Lucas. Lucas was kind, patient, someone who listened when Ethan talked and understood when he didn't. Someone who brought calm into rooms that didn't have any. But that made it harder, not easier, because Ethan didn't know how to handle someone who cared without conditions. He stood still for a moment, gripping the door handle as if it might pull away from him. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe slowly, but every breath felt uneven. He remembered their last conversation, how things escalated too quickly. How he walked away before Lucas had a chance to finish what he was trying to say. The memory made his chest tighten. He wished he could take back that moment. Wished he had stayed long enough to listen, but wishing never fixed anything. The knock came again, softer this time, almost apologetic. Like Lucas didn't want to bother him, and that small courtesy only made Ethan feel more guilty. Lucas never pushed too hard, never demanded more than Ethan could give. And maybe that was why Ethan was terrified, because Lucas made room for him in ways he didn't think he deserved. Ethan forced his eyes open, feeling the pressure of the moment rising inside him. If he didn't open the door, he knew Lucas would leave quietly. Without anger, without drama, and that made the possibility of losing him even heavier. He turned the knob slowly, and the second the door cracked open, cool air rushed into the apartment along with the soft glow of the hallway light. Lucas stood there with damp hair and a shy smile that didn't reach his eyes, like he was trying to hide that he was nervous too. His jacket was wet from the rain, and he hugged it close as if to keep from dripping on the floor. Ethan suddenly realized how long he had kept him waiting. "Hey," Lucas said gently, voice steady but soft. Ethan swallowed hard, stepping back enough to let him enter. Lucas didn't move right away. He just studied Ethan for a second, not in a judging way, but in a concerned way, as if he wanted to understand before speaking. Ethan hated that look, not because it was harsh, but because it was too kind, too forgiving, too patient. "Can I come in?" Lucas asked, still giving him the choice. Ethan hesitated, not because he didn't want Lucas inside, but because he didn't know what would happen when he finally let him in, what they would say, what emotions would surface, what truths he would have to admit. But when he saw Lucas's smile shrink just a little, something inside Ethan cracked open. He didn't want Lucas thinking he wasn't wanted. He didn't want him walking away again, not tonight. So he stepped aside, letting Lucas pass through the doorway. Lucas walked in slowly, almost carefully, as if entering a room full of fragile things. Ethan closed the door but kept his hand on the knob for a second longer than needed, steadying himself. The apartment felt smaller with Lucas there, but not in a suffocating way, more like the kind of closeness that forces honesty. Ethan could feel his pulse in his throat as he watched Lucas place his wet jacket over the back of a chair. He noticed the way Lucas's eyes scanned the room, the way he lingered on the silent coffee mug on the counter, the unfolded blanket on the couch, all signs of a quiet life that didn't let many people in. Ethan wondered what Lucas was thinking, if he was replaying their last conversation too. If he was questioning whether coming here was a mistake. Lucas finally turned to him, brushing wet hair off his forehead. And the gentle expression he gave Ethan almost made time slow down. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was something softer, something that made Ethan's chest ache. "I wasn't sure you'd open the door," Lucas admitted, voice low but steady. Ethan felt the truth of that hit him. He almost didn't. But now, standing there with Lucas inside the warm apartment and rain still whispering against the windows, Ethan realized how close he came to losing someone who mattered more than he ever said out loud. And for the first time that night, he felt ready not for everything, but for this moment. With Lucas standing in front of him, waiting, hoping, still believing in them despite everything unsaid. Lucas stepped fully inside Ethan's apartment. The smell of rain and damp coats mixing with the faint aroma of coffee left from earlier in the day. The apartment was small, cozy, and lived in. The kind of place where someone felt safe but also exposed if emotions ran high. And right now, emotions were high more than either of them wanted to admit. Ethan watched him carefully, noticing the slight tremor in Lucas's hands as he set his jacket on the chair. The way he tried to make himself appear casual when every part of his posture said otherwise. Silence filled the space between them, heavy but not hostile, and for a few seconds, neither knew what to say, both aware of the week of distance. The arguments left unresolved and the words they had been holding back. Ethan wanted to speak first, to bridge the gap with explanations, apologies, or confessions. But his throat tightened, and the right words refused to form. He could feel Lucas's gaze on him, gentle but searching, and it unnerved him in a way that he could not explain. Lucas finally sat at the small kitchen table, leaning back slightly, running a hand over his face as if trying to calm himself before speaking. His eyes, distant yet focused, studying Ethan for any hint of what was coming next. "I thought, maybe you didn't want to see me," Lucas began, the words tentative, careful, like stepping on fragile glass. Ethan swallowed hard, the lump in his throat catching as he shook his head slowly. "No," he said, voice low. I just didn't know how to." He trailed off, unsure if he could articulate the tangle of fear, pride, and longing he felt all at once. Lucas nodded as though he understood without needing more. But his eyes still held that subtle hurt, the kind that didn't vanish with just words. They had argued the week before, sharp words exchanged, frustration boiling over. And Ethan walking away had left a wound neither knew how to tend. Now, with Lucas here, wet and patient and waiting, all those emotions resurfaced, raw and insistent. The rain outside mirrored the tension, each drop against the window amplifying the silence, reminding Ethan that moments like this didn't wait and that sometimes hesitation could make things worse. Lucas reached for the mug on the counter, though he didn't lift it, just held it, letting the warmth seep into his hands. He looked at Ethan, expression soft but questioning, and Ethan realized how much he had missed the quiet, subtle gestures, the way Lucas cared without demanding, the sense of calm that came even when things were tense. Ethan wanted to tell him everything, to pour out weeks of thoughts and regrets, but he feared overwhelming Lucas, feared losing him again if he spoke too much too soon. "I know I shut you out," Ethan admitted finally, the words forced through the lump in his throat. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know how to deal with all of it." Lucas's lips pressed into a line, his eyes dropping to the table for a moment, and Ethan felt that familiar pang of guilt for the pain he had caused, guilt for the distance he had created, guilt for not being better. But Lucas didn't leave, didn't scowl, didn't react with anger. He stayed still near enough to reach, yet giving Ethan the space he clearly needed. "Ethan," Lucas said quietly, voice steady but filled with emotion, "you didn't push me away, you just walked out before I could finish." The words hit harder than Ethan expected, a reminder that love could be patient but also fragile, that even small mistakes could echo longer than imagined. Ethan nodded, swallowing again, wishing he could undo the past but realizing he couldn't, that all he could do was be present now. Lucas shifted slightly, leaning forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped loosely, eyes still locked on Ethan's. There was tension, yes, but also hope, the kind that sneaks in quietly when two people are willing to face uncomfortable truths. Ethan's chest tightened with longing and regret and something warmer, something that reminded him why he cared so deeply for Lucas despite everything. They sat like that, letting moments pass without forcing conversation. understanding that sometimes silence could speak louder than words. But the storm outside, relentless and insistent, seemed to demand movement, reflection, change. And Ethan finally knew he had to act, had to let Lucas see the truth in his eyes before it was too late. He opened his mouth, words forming slowly, stammering at first, I don't want to lose you. Not like this. Not ever. Lucas's gaze softened, the tension in his shoulders easing, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt the weight lift slightly, replaced by cautious hope. Lucas leaned back, running a hand through his wet hair, eyes never leaving Ethan. I don't want to be lost either, Ethan. I want to know you want me here, that I'm not forcing it. Ethan exhaled slowly, realizing that his heart had been holding this moment captive, waiting for Lucas to step inside to bridge the distance. And now the space between them felt electric, charged with unspoken feelings, longing, and the fragile possibility of forgiveness and connection. Words had failed them before, but tonight the room seemed to hum with what could be said, what could be felt. And Ethan knew that if he let fear take over, he might regret it forever. So he leaned forward slightly, hands resting on the table. Voice steadying, I want you here. Lucas, I want you to stay. The corner of Lucas's lips lifted into a faint, relieved smile, and the storm outside felt less like a threat and more like a backdrop to the emotional storm between them. A storm that could end. Perhaps in understanding, perhaps in healing, perhaps in something neither dared to name yet. But both silently hoped for as they stared at each other, hearts beating faster, waiting for the next move, for the next word. For the moment when distance would finally, the storm outside continued to pound against Ethan's apartment windows. But inside, the tension between him and Lucas had grown heavier, almost electric, like something was ready to break free if they didn't act. Lucas had moved to the balcony, leaning on the railing and staring out at the blurred city lights, rain streaming down the glass, each droplet reflecting a fragment of the emotions that neither of them could fully express. Ethan followed, keeping a careful distance, unsure if approaching him would push Lucas away or pull them closer. But the need to bridge the gap was stronger than his fear. He watched Lucas's shoulders tense and relax repeatedly, as if he were fighting an internal battle, and Ethan felt the familiar ache of wanting to reach out, to make everything okay, yet knowing words alone might not be enough. Finally, Ethan broke the silence, voice quiet but firm. I didn't shut the door because I didn't care. Lucas's head tilted slightly, just enough to show curiosity, a subtle invitation to continue. Ethan swallowed hard, heart pounding, and admitted, I shut it because I cared too much. I didn't know how to handle it, how to deal with what I felt for you, and I thought keeping distance was safer. The honesty hung in the air, raw and unpolished, and Lucas's expression softened imperceptibly, the tension in his face easing as he absorbed the words. He didn't speak immediately, letting the moment stretch, letting the vulnerability settle between them, and Ethan felt a fragile hope ignite inside him. Lucas finally turned to face him, eyes bright with unspoken emotion, and said, Then why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you say that instead of walking away? Ethan's throat tightened again, the weight of past mistakes pressing down on him. But he knew that hiding his feelings now would be worse than any discomfort that speaking them might cause. Because I was scared, he admitted, voice trembling slightly. Scared of losing you. Scared of not being enough. Scared of making everything worse. I wanted to protect us, even though I know it probably hurt more than it helped. Lucas's lips curved into a soft, almost forgiving smile, and Ethan felt an unexpected relief wash over him, as if admitting the truth had opened a window that had been closed far too long. You don't have to be scared of me, Lucas said gently, stepping closer, reducing the distance without pressure, his presence both comforting and thrilling. Ethan could feel the warmth radiating from him, the subtle energy that had always drawn him in. And it made his chest tighten with anticipation, longing, and fear all at once. He wanted to reach out, to close the gap, to touch the reassurance that Lucas offered. Yet he hesitated. uncertain if Lucas was offering comfort or waiting for Ethan to decide for himself. Lucas tilted his head slightly, a silent question, a small invitation. And Ethan realized that the walls he had built around his heart were unnecessary now, at least in this moment. He could see the patience in Lucas's eyes, the way he held back, giving Ethan the space to act. To choose, to open himself fully without words forcing it. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked glass, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil and release happening inside them simultaneously. Each drop a reminder that moments like this were fleeting, precious, and demanding courage. Ethan finally took a breath, steadying himself, feeling the weight of fear loosen, replaced with a yearning that had been building for days, weeks, perhaps months, and he stepped closer, matching Lucas's gentle proximity without overstepping. "I don't want to lose you," Ethan said softly, the words carrying a sincerity that could not be faked. "Not now. Not ever. I want to be here with you without holding back." Without walls, Lucas's eyes glistened, and he allowed a small, reassuring smile to form, taking Ethan's words not as a declaration of weakness, but as a bridge, a signal that connection was possible, that the tension could transform into closeness. He reached out slightly, hand hovering near Ethan's, careful, cautious, like testing the waters of a deep current, and Ethan didn't pull back. Instead, he let the space between them close, letting the warmth, the hope, the vulnerability mingle in a way that felt natural and safe. The storm outside seemed to ease, though the rain continued, the thunder fading into the background, replaced by the rhythm of two hearts reconciling. Two people confronting the fear that had kept them apart and discovering that openness could be more powerful than distance. Ethan's chest rose and fell with anticipation and relief, knowing that the next moments could define their relationship, could either cement the bond or push them apart again. And he felt an urgent, thrilling need to not let this slip away. Lucas leaned a fraction closer, not forcing intimacy, but offering presence, connection, and trust, and Ethan responded instinctively, closing the final inches with a movement that was both hesitant and confident, letting the storm within him align with the storm outside, feeling the energy of longing, honesty, and forgiveness collide in a way that demanded recognition. They stood on the balcony together, rain soaking the glass and wind tousling their hair. And in that fragile, charged silence, Ethan understood that fear no longer controlled him. He had admitted the truth, shown vulnerability, and Lucas had met him halfway, steady, patient, and present. And in that shared moment, the possibility of something more, something lasting and real stretched before them. Delicate, yet undeniable, inviting, promising. And Ethan knew that if they let the night continue, if they kept the honesty flowing, this could be the start of a connection that weathered storms both outside and within. The air between them felt alive, every breath carrying the weight of unspoken words, every heartbeat sinking in tentative harmony. And Ethan finally realized that standing here, facing his fears, and being present with Lucas was more than courage, it was love, hope, and the first step towards something neither of them wanted to lose. You to solve, into connection. The storm outside had quieted, leaving only a soft drizzle that streaked the windows and made the city lights shimmer through the glass. But inside Ethan's apartment, the air was charged with a tension that neither of them could ignore. Lucas stood near the balcony, close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth radiating from him, and Ethan realized how much he had longed for this closeness, this shared space where fear and walls no longer existed. He swallowed hard, feeling the rapid beat of his heart, and took a slow step forward, closing some of the distance while leaving Lucas the choice to step back if he wanted. "You invited me in tonight?" Lucas said softly, voice steady but carrying the weight of emotion. "And I don't want to misunderstand that." The words hit Ethan like a spark, confirming everything he had been afraid to say, everything he had kept inside. And he felt a swell of courage rise up within him, mingled with relief and anticipation. "I wanted you here," Ethan admitted, voice low, shaking slightly but firm. I needed you here. I didn't want to shut you out anymore. Not tonight, not ever. Lucas's gaze softened, and Ethan could see the quiet hope shining through the deep brown of his eyes, a hope that mirrored his own longing and fear and desire for connection. Lucas stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the kind of movement that demanded trust without forcing it, and Ethan felt the final piece of his fear dissolve, replaced by a warmth and certainty that had been missing for too long. He realized that opening the door earlier was only the first step, the literal entry into the apartment. But this moment, this closeness, this shared vulnerability was opening the door to something far deeper. The silence stretched between them. Not awkward, but charged. Every small movement significant. Every glance heavy with unspoken words, and Ethan felt his chest tighten with anticipation, fear, and a gentle joy he hadn't expected. You don't have to have everything figured out, Lucas whispered, letting the words fill the space between them. You just have to let me stay. It was an offer, an invitation. And Ethan felt tears prick the corners of his eyes, a mix of relief and gratitude and a longing he could no longer suppress. He nodded slightly, his lips curving into a tentative smile as he allowed himself to finally be fully present, to trust Lucas with the emotions he had tried so hard to hide. And in that moment, he knew that every misstep, every argument, every wall he had built had led to this chance to be honest, raw, and open. Then stay, he whispered, voice stronger now, more certain, carrying a weight of longing and hope. Stay tonight.